Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Dear Miss T with Terry Ruel. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, and good morning, everyone. Well, how is everyone doing? We are living in some overwhelming times. I know everyone probably feels like we're getting hit with something new and different every day, which we are. And anytime you're living with this much chaos, there's going to be a constant need to try to get back in balance. And one of the things that happens when things keep getting thrown out of balance so much is the trust starts to break down in the system. And so I thought one of the things we have to do to be able to trust ourselves and trust each other and start rebuilding and trusting systems is to be able to communicate. And the difficulty right now with a lot of what's happening and the breakdown of the trust is that people are having a very difficult time even communicating. And that is what we need to be able to do to rebuild trust. So I started thinking about, how could we maybe communicate, even though we may hold very different world views or very different opinions and thoughts about things. And I thought about, being a clinical social worker, my training has been to try to always look at things from whether they're healthy or not healthy. And being trained in systems theory, I learned to not just look at the parts or one thing at a time, but to try to be very holistic and look at how the whole process is affecting everything. And that starts even with the individual. We are each individual systems. Every part of all our organs, every part of our body affects the other part. Every part of our emotions affects the other part. Our psyche, the way we think, the way our mind works affects us, even to the point now where we understand that, even stress affects the whole body, and it affects us emotionally and psychologically. So every individual is, working on trying to keep their own individual system in balance, but that affects the group because the group is made up of individuals, and so the balance that's happening with each individual is going to affect the balance that happens in the group or the imbalance, and that goes out into the whole society, to your community, to your state, to your country, and globally. And we are in a system now of transformation globally. And this has never happened before. So we've talked a little bit about it, I think. But understanding that this transformation is so huge that it's affecting every individual system as well as every individual system is affecting the global system. So how do we know if our systems are moving in a healthy direction or an unhealthy direction? And if we can start focusing more on what's going to be healthy and what is not healthy, maybe we can communicate about what we need to go to or do to keep going in the direction of health. So if we start with, each individual, we need to understand, and this may be a whole nother show, but that each individual has to complete each stage of their own development to get to a place in adulthood where they have maturity. And we like to think of maturity as a sign of health. Okay. So how do I know if I'm, developing into a healthy adult? Does does what I say and do match? Okay. Do I know who I am? Do I know what I feel, what I need, what I want, and why? Okay. And that is not easy. If you have not been nurtured in a healthy environment growing up, you are not going to be able to complete the developmental stages to adulthood, to get to a place in your identity where you know how you feel, what you need, and what you want. That is why people develop roles like people pleasers. Okay, so if we're looking at the interconnectedness of every individual affects every group affects the community affects the society, you're only going to be as healthy as the individuals in the group, the society as a whole. So that comes back to why it is so important for us to have support systems in place for parents to be able to help children develop individually through every stage of development without trauma, without abuse, without neglect, so they can become healthy adults. Okay? Another sign of a healthy, mature adult is an ability to feel vulnerable. They're able to share very honestly and rigorously their true feelings and thoughts in a way that is able to know who is trustworthy to be able to share with and how much, and to be able to be real, be genuine, be authentic. And the only way we can be that is to really know how we feel, what we need, what we want, and why. What's driving that? Okay? And that's why we talk so much about self-awareness, because we don't want to be driven by the things that we're not consciously aware of. Because if we're driven by fears or things needs that didn't get met growing up, and we don't know that, then we're going to act in a way that's not going to be mature or healthy.
So, Terry, I have a question about that.
Sure.
Del Marie is in the chat room and she's saying she's waiting patiently. She's got to learn some more. I love that about Del, always becoming and more self-aware, which leads me to the question, maybe we all think, or many of us think, well, I am mature. Aren't I mature? I think I've got myself together.
Well, and
what's the process of discovering that maybe that's not really true? Maybe we've got some self-discovery and self-awareness that needs to happen. What does that process look like, Terry?
Well, I think right there, having an awareness that maturity is a lifelong process, and being open to always learning and growing and being teachable is a sign of maturity right up till we die. Because, you can be old and not be wise if we haven't learned from our life experiences and aren't open to learning what we can from each experience. We're not going to know what that lesson was, so we're not going to have the wisdom to be able to change that. And ultimately, to face our death is going to take the greatest amount of maturity, because we're going to have to be able to have no denial, of course, or that's going to be a block to us being able to pass peacefully. And that is probably the most unconscious drive or fear that people have. And so we don't usually face that until we're much older and have had enough experience that we're able to handle facing that.
Mm-hmm.
So each life stage, even through adulthood, we will have milestones, you might say, like you were talking about becoming a grandma. Every 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, each one of those decades, you might say, are going to be a deeper learning and growing and maturity if we are open to being teachable and are self-aware, like you say, of looking at what do I need, what do I feel, what is this all about for me? Is it triggering anything in me? Being able to recognize the discomforts when they come up and being able to take those as, okay, this is a road sign. This is something trying to tell me there's something going on here. What's happening? Why is that being triggered right now? So even with all the chaos that's going on right now, this can be a great opportunity for maturing and growing if we can recognize our triggers and where they're coming from. And then we can say, okay, I see what this is. This is a real fear of death, or this is a real fear of not being able to cope with the chaos, or this is a fear of being ridiculed for the way I believe, or for being shamed because I don't understand something, or I don't want to put myself out there because it's too scary. And so, we can use all these times also to grow and mature. I mean, it's like when we talk about, our ancestors during World War I, World War II, that the horrible things that people have gone through in the past, and the genocides, just all these unbelievable things that most of us have a hard time even, comprehending, because they were so foreign to the way most of us grew up. But we go back and we listen to those elders or try to read what they learned through that, and that's what helps us cope. So that's a part of maturity, is being able to continue to be teachable and to have humility, to know I'm not any less than anyone else, and I'm not any more than anyone else. And that I can ask for advice, and that I need mentors, and we all do. And that we never stop learning. And another sign of maturity, of course, is ability to keep commitments, to show gratitude. A big one is to be able to put others before ourselves. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean to the point where we're, codependent and hurting ourselves, but that we understand, not just spiritually, but in every, in our bones and blood, and, that we are all interconnected. Mm-hmm. None of us is free until all of us is free, because everything affects everyone else. Mm-hmm. And that our livelihoods, the health of our planet, the health of our community, the health of our country, all of it is interconnected. And even though we are individuals that are sacred, the interconnection between us all is sacred too. Mm-hmm. And one can't be healthy without the other.
Mm-hmm. Terry, I have a question. As I'm listening to you, I love your monthly show. I'm probably like your biggest fan. Aside from the fact that we're friends, but sometimes we're so ensconced in dysfunction. Maybe the dysfunction of a family religion, or tradition, or family dynamics, or relationship dynamics. It's so dysfunctional. We don't know it's dysfunctional because maybe we've never known anything different than that religious dysfunction or family dysfunction, what have you. What are some of the markers or some of the red flags for people who are maybe waking up right now to perhaps their own paradigm or their own life is ensconced in dysfunction or they're part of something dysfunctional? How do we know that?
Well, let's start with okay, if you're in a nurturing situation, a healthy situation, you're going to feel free to talk about all your inner feelings. If you're in a dysfunctional system, you're going to compulsively protect your inner feelings, or you're going to try to deny them, or um, somehow some feelings are okay and other feelings aren't okay. So in a healthy system, all people's feelings are okay. And all feelings are allowed to be shared, of course, appropriately. We don't harm another person. But in a dysfunctional system, only certain feelings are okay. In a nurturing system, the person is more important than the performance. In a dysfunctional system, the performance is more important than the person. In the larger system, you might even say that performance and profit is put before people and the planet.
Wow.
Now, animals even know better than this, but, that is one thing about being as smart as we are. It can make us really dumb if we aren't self-aware.
Right.
Because we're capable then of denial or minimization or rationalization. And if it moves just from healthy to dysfunctional and then into disorder, once it's a mental disorder and it becomes locked in there, then then it has to be contained, because just rational therapy and love therapy and what we might want to think of as interventions may not be possible until that person is able to get to some place of balance where that can even break through. It's kind of like if you're looking at addictions. A person can be so much in denial to the point where they kill themselves.
Yes.
Okay, so you can't just try to talk to them about it. You have to have other kinds of interventions that can help them not even be able to, get that drug or get the alcohol. That's why we have inpatient rehabs, places where people can actually be out of that system of disorder to a point where they can finally be able to get some help or receive it. So, okay, in a nurturing system, all subjects are open to discussion. That's one of the things that is so concerning and difficult for those of us who are in the mental health field right now, because we see so much of this dysfunction where nothing is open to discussion in a healthy way. It's either black or white, and there's so much division, and that breaks down trust more, because in a nurturing system, differences are accepted and all subjects are open to discussion. And the more dysfunctional a system becomes, the more taboo subjects there are, the more secrets that happen, the more everyone must conform to the strongest person's ideas and values and beliefs. There's a great deal of control and criticism that starts happening. There is punishment. There is shaming. There are, all these shoulds and all these rules, but then the rules become very unclear, inconsistent, and rigid. and the atmosphere gets less and less relaxed. There's less and less joy. There's more and more anger and fear and stress and tension. And so people become exhausted. And that's what you hear all the time right now.
Mm-hmm.
That people are having a really hard time even facing up to and working through their stress, which is a sign of health, because they're so exhausted trying to just fight this fear that's being so stirred up every day. And, there isn't a balance of, okay, yes, we have some real problems to solve, but this is how we start to solve these problems. And so people feel tired and hurt, disappointed. They start to avoid and deny, and then the dysfunction grows. And if it grows enough, and people will start to lose their self-worth or lose their what strengths they did have, then they become very vulnerable to being misled.
Mm-hmm.
And, part of the problem with not being able to discuss things and the trust being broke down is that people have a really hard time knowing what to believe and are not believing facts anymore or trusting. We used to trust our institutions and trust the doctors and trust the experts. And of course, our democracy has never been perfect. Yes, we have done some, very abhorrent things. But if we're only looking at everything in black and white and we can't talk about it, how can we ever improve our democracy? That's why it's so important that there not be any secrets, but that we also have legitimate information that we can trust.
Yes.
And of course, a lot of things have played into that. Social media being a new thing that people didn't really understand, and we could get into a lot about that. But the most important thing is if I can understand what I'm looking at, if this is healthy or not healthy, is this contributing to growth and learning and solving problems and acceptance of differences? Is this respectful criticism? Is it offered with appropriate either consequences or actions for solutions? We want to look at whatever we're hearing or reading or seeing in it from a lens of, is this sound healthy or does this sound dysfunctional or does this sound like a disorder? And, a lot of people, of course, aren't, don't know what a disorder looks like. But if you know it is increasing your difficulty to understand or to make sense of or to find solutions to, then it might be a disorder. It's like gaslighting. People talk about that a lot now. There's a much better understanding of gaslighting. If somebody is keeping on saying things that are causing you confusion and keeping on denying what you're actually hearing and seeing with your own eyes and ears, then you can, know that you're probably looking at some kind of disorder. And you can trust your gut usually if you're, if you've been listening to it and you're taking care of yourself as far as trying to spend time staying connected to what's healthy and your higher source, you're going to know, okay, this just doesn't feel right and it's not making a lot of sense. And so even though I might not totally understand the disorder, I can still understand that there's something wrong here. It's like kids who grow up in dysfunctional families with, whether it's addiction or a mental disorder, abuse or neglect. It's the kids understand something's wrong, but they get programmed over time to start accepting things that aren't healthy as normal. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's why it's very confusing and very difficult once they're adults to be able to sort out what's normal and healthy and what's dysfunctional without help. So you combine all that with not having their needs met, and it's going to be very hard for people to often know what is normal. And if more and more things that aren't healthy, and let's not use the word normal, let's just say healthy, if more and more things that aren't healthy keep happening over time, even in a society, people start adapting to it. Okay, so it's really important for us to be really, working on ourselves to understand what's healthy and what's not, so that we don't become normalized to unhealthy behavior. And I'm afraid that's what's happened, even to the point where people are accepting that, well, that's just how it is now. Everybody's divided and you're on the other, one side or the other. Well, that might be what we're seeing, a lot of, but that doesn't mean that it's healthy.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to work on ways to bridge that divide.
And for people who are afraid to speak up and to use their voice, that can be difficult for some people. And Del Marie has a question for you, Terry.
Sure.
How do I respond to someone who doesn't want to change? And I have to consider my place in our cultural ways. I didn't want to impose. How do you respond to somebody who doesn't want to change? And particularly when it comes to, Del, if you could clarify that. And I have to consider my place in our cultural ways.
Right. So I would say I respect your need to stay where you're at. But if it starts to hurt others, then I need you to respect that I have to speak out about that. Because none of us have the right to stay in a belief to the point where it harms others. And once we understand that it's not just the other, it's ourself, that it harms us too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Then it becomes something that we realize the common good is for the good of the individual. Okay? Maybe that person doesn't feel like they want to give in, as much as where you're at. But then you can say, is there some common ground we can find here? Is there a compromise? Is there a place we can go that doesn't feel hurtful to me and doesn't feel hurtful to you and doesn't feel like it's hurtful to others?
Mm-hmm.
And try to keep the discussion open by, respecting where they're at and trying not to, judge the person personally, but okay, this is where you're coming from, this is where I'm coming from. Is there some way that we can try to meet in the middle? Because it is about balance, and unfortunately, it's going to take probably a while before we're evolved to a point where we're all going to understand how much each of us affects everything else and each other.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, hopefully that's the path that we're on now, the road that we're on. But that's why it's so difficult.
And
You know,
Terry, would you talk about for a moment the importance of, you know, sometimes we can't just walk away. You know, there are obligations or what have you. We can't just walk away. But what's a healthy way of distancing ourselves when we're feeling hurt or we are being hurt by someone's position? Because we do have to take care of ourselves, even if we can't completely walk away.
Yes, definitely. Well, if you're in a position where your boundary can't be to separate from that situation, and it's that unhealthy, then you have to, like say, find the way to take care of yourself. Where sometimes for me that can be just you know, going into prayer and being surrounded by the Christ light or the blue light of the Marys, or however you can imagine it, to know that you can ask for that help and be surrounded by it, and nothing gets through. That is not love. That it just bounces off back to the source. And that, you know, that's what I do even with therapy sometimes. If I try to just see myself as a vehicle of, you know, source, please send through me what this person needs, and whatever they need to let out goes through me to source.
Mm-hmm.
Because, of course, you know, Creator is the healer.
Right.
So I don't have to do it, and I don't have to absorb it. Mm-hmm. I turn that over and I give it to God, but I pray about it, you know, for that. I believe that, you know, the energy of love is the most powerful. And I wanted to end with that today, so we know that even when we can't change someone's mind, that even one individual who lives and vibrates to the energy of optimism and willingness to be non-judgmental of others can counterbalance the negativity of 90,000 individuals.
That's amazing.
One individual who lives and vibrates to the energy of pure love and reverence for all life will counterbalance the negativity of 750,000 individuals. One individual who lives and vibrates to the energy of illumination and infinite peace and bliss can counterbalance the negativity of 10 million people. And the avatars like Christ and Buddha and Krishna and if it was not for those avatars, we probably, you know, what they have learned about energy now is they counterbalance the collective of the whole of mankind. So if we are vibrating to the energy of grace, spirit, love, in a world of non-duality or complete oneness, we can counterbalance the negativity of 70 million people.
That's astonishing.
So, you know, we are holistic beings. Everything we do matters.
It does.
Everything. And when we feel like we can't do anything in the physical world, count on and go back to and make sure you're spending time in the non-physical world and asking for that help, because it's doing a lot more than we might realize.
Exactly. And I think that we're living in a time right now of great change. And a lot of people are clinging to the old. They are clinging with a white knuckle ride to the old. And for those that are looking toward the future, that are rolling into not only the present, but, you know, where do we go from here rather than let's continue to do the same old, it's very trying. And as you were saying that, you know, sometimes there can be consequences of being the person who's willing to be the optimist and say, but we need to all move forward.
Mhm.
But
Yep.
doing so and being the voice of that is necessary.
Yes, we need every voice, because even the negative voices right now are teaching us.
Yeah.
So I think if we can stay open to learning and growing from all of these experiences, then we will evolve, to our full potential that
Mm-hmm.
we were created to be. But we have to hear each other. We have to listen. We have to be open to, growth and understanding, and be able to communicate about it so that we can rebuild the trust with our brothers and sisters. And that's only going to happen if we can find ways to communicate without making people feel less than,
Mm-hmm. I love
or
that.
wrong or right.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about right or wrong. It's so much as that if we can look at non-judgmentally as, this seems healthy to me, this seems, like a way to go that's going to help everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I have the right way of doing things and you have the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to walk away far enough to have some space, some healthy space in between.
Definitely. that self-care is very important. I had posted something about, I had thought about when Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights before he faced what he knew was coming. And I thought, about that the 40 days before the election. It's like, well, we all need to be going into the desert every day because these next 40 days could be really challenging.
I'll see you in the desert, Terry.
Okay, sounds good. I love you all. God bless you all.
Have a beautiful day, Terry. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And I know that you love the show as much as I do. And thank you, Terry, for all that you do for so many.
Oh, thank you. God bless.